Hi, everyone. My name is Dawn Colley, and I am an assistant teaching professor in the program for writing and rhetoric, and I'm also our liaison to continuing education. This summer, for the Wellness Faculty Advisory Committee, my focus was on belonging, mattering, and mentoring as it pertains to wellness. The research primarily focuses on undergrads, but I was also very interested in finding ways that this connects also to faculty and staff. In thinking about the wellness of our community, it's very important that we not focus on one element, but rather approach this from a more holistic lens. So while the research does not, or the research that I was able to do does not strictly focus on faculty and staff, I will be touching on that a little bit because we can create those pathways too. So in terms of belonging, the research that I did tends to agree that belonging has to do with being accepted as we are, not laboring to fit in, not putting on a guise or performing a role, but rather understanding that in whatever particular space, we get to show up as we are, and we are simply accepted in whatever moment that we are. If perhaps it's not the most ideal of moments, we're still accepted. We still get to be there. We are still welcomed. The research also suggests that we step away from saying things like, you belong. While that suggestion that we resist those types of statements might land differently for all of us, the way that I interpret it is that simply saying the statement is not enough. And from my perspective, it's an important statement to articulate. And if we then follow through with a different offering, perhaps some opportunity or activity that creates that community space within the classroom, maybe that follow through is going to provide a little bit more substance to that feeling. But I also think that it's important that we show up also authentically. And if we very much want to communicate, everyone belongs here. We are here to learn and grow together as a community. That's an important thing for us to state. What the research also suggests is that beyond the agreement of being able to show up and be accepted, there's not a lot of agreement about what else belonging includes. And what that indicates is that we need to engage in conversation about what that means for us as individuals, what that means within our class community spaces, what that means for us as colleagues working together with faculty and staff. As we're coming together, what does this mean for each of us? And how do we come to an understanding about that? In terms of belongingness, there's also the idea that the data that we have access to, or when data is collected, it's capturing one moment in time. And feelings of belonging shift as we move through the day, as we move through a semester, as we move through a year. And so the studies do suggest that we respond appropriately to the data that we gather, but also recognize that that data is perhaps representative of one moment in time. And so we are encouraged, therefore, to continue to think about the importance of that moment in understanding that data, but also consider the idea that sometimes people step in and people step away. So providing a variety of opportunities for people to feel a sense of belonging within a class, within a department, within a major, within a college, within the university requires that many of us are creating those spaces. So it is not simply on faculty to create those spaces within their classrooms. we can do our part insofar as it makes sense for the class that we teach, for the subject matter, for the modality, for the size of the class, etc. It is clear that there is no one approach, and there is no expectation from the research that I've done that everyone needs to create these spaces or these opportunities at the same level. That if we are creating what we can, where we can, and everyone else is doing the same, there will be myriad opportunities throughout the undergrad or college graduate experience. Also for faculty and staff, myriad opportunities to feel a sense of belonging. So in terms of, just to recap that a little bit, it's important that we each as individuals think about what opportunities we can create within our class spaces. And that might have to do with talking about ground rules, or I call them community agreements, setting that foundation where everybody can feel like they get to show up and they get to share their perspectives without trying to modify them to make them acceptable to others, but rather they get to speak what is real for them, what is important to them, knowing that those insights matter and they're important because they allow all of us to grow by learning new perspectives, learning new ideas, learning new ways of seeing the world. It might look like creating different opportunities for collaborations between faculty and students or between student groups. Just a couple of ideas about how we might think about creating different opportunities within our class spaces. But again, I would very much encourage us to think about how to create these opportunities also for our colleagues, faculty, and staff included. In terms of mattering, there is more agreement in terms of what that means. So there are two things that I took away from my research. The first is that someone's presence is recognized. So an individual doesn't simply feel like they are filling a seat or performing a role, but they're recognized for being there. When they're not there, their absence is recognized. Many of us do this really quite naturally within our class spaces, either in person, face to face, or online, even asynchronously, and just remark like, hey, thanks for showing up today. How are you doing? Or I noticed that you haven't been here for a couple classes. We might send an email. I noticed that you haven't been around. Is everything okay? That's a suggestion to that individual that they matter, that we notice that they're there and when they're not there. The other thing that I think is so beautiful is that there's a value, like the individual knows that they offer value. So a value add to the community. They understand that not only that their presence is recognized, but they are offering something that others value, that others are learning from, that others are celebrating. So thinking about how we might create those spaces to provide a message here or there about how to create a system wherein people feel valued for their participation and for their contributions to those spaces. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that when people don't feel valued, when they don't feel like they matter, that's when, based on the research, that's when people start expressing burnout and overwhelm. That they don't see that their contributions matter. They don't see that their contributions are valued. They don't feel as though their presence is recognized. Because of that, I think that we can start to create those systems when we start to hear, or before we start to hear, but certainly if someone is expressing, a student or a colleague, feelings of overwhelm, feelings of disempowerment, feelings of burnout, we might start to think about whether or not that they are being recognized in ways that are of import to them. The other thing, turning to mentoring, which is really connected to mattering, is that spaces where mentoring is offered, those mentorship opportunities create greater connections and reinforce mattering. In terms of setting that up in a classroom, that might be somewhat difficult for us depending on the subjects that we teach, again, class size, modality, etc. And so the research does indicate that opportunities for mentorship are more likely to come from departments or student organizations, etc. But one thing that we do have access to at CU is the Learning Assistant Alliance. So I do want to spend just a moment speaking about the Learning Assistant Alliance because the incorporation of learning assistants or LAs into our classes offers us a beautiful opportunity to create this type of mentorship, peer mentorship between students. LA's learning assistants, we can bring them into our classes and they facilitate learning. Very often, we might bring an LA in who has been through our class already. So they understand the subject, they know the ropes, they can help students and guide them through the process through certain assignments to provide their own experience, how they approached a particular assignment, along with instructor guidance. It can be a beautiful opportunity to provide just a little bit more assistance for students in our classes. So if anybody is interested in learning about the Learning Assistant Alliance, I would very much recommend that you reach out, Betsy McIntosh. And there are other, peer mentors. I myself am one faculty mentor for the Learning Assistant Alliance, in particular for continuing ed. So I'm happy to chat with anybody about that. Speaking about this again, in terms of how we look at belonging, mattering, and mentoring for our entire community, I just want to impress again, the focus is on students, and that is so important that we are paying attention to the needs of students, that we are creating spaces of belonging, that we are creating opportunities for them to know that they matter. It's also important that we are offering these moments to our faculty and staff colleagues as well. It supports the entire community and its ability to thrive together when we all know that our presence is necessary and important, that we grow together as a community, that we are here to share our perspectives, but also to learn from the perspectives of others. As we move forward in this, again, this is just some initial research that I was able to do over the summer. This is definitely a starting point for us all. I remain available to you all. If you want to reach out, I'm happy to discuss these ideas more at length, to troubleshoot with you, to brainstorm ways you can bring it in. But let me say just one more time, there is no expectation, and the research makes it very clear. This cannot simply happen through faculty alone, that it has to happen on a multitude of levels within the university, and all we are invited to do is our part as it makes sense for us and as it makes sense for the subjects that we teach. So thank you for listening. And again, if you have any questions, if there's anything that I can do to help, just reach out and let me know.